In 2024, several military forces around the world have earned infamy not for their defense capabilities, but for their associations with criminal activities. These militaries, plagued by corruption, human rights abuses, and links to organized crime, cast a dark shadow over their nations and the global community. This video explores the most criminal armies in the world, delving into their controversial actions and the impact they have on their respective countries and beyond. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the most pressing and controversial topics around the world. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. In today's video, we will be discussing the most criminal armies in the world in 2024. These militaries are known not for their valor, but for their corruption, human rights violations, and connections to illicit activities. Let's dive in. 1. North Korean People's Army. The North Korean People's Army, KPA, is notorious for its oppressive regime and human rights abuses. Under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, the KPA has been implicated in a wide range of criminal activities, both domestically and internationally. These include the illicit drug trade, arms smuggling, and cybercrime. The regime's reliance on military force to maintain control over its population has led to widespread fear and suffering among North Korean citizens. Forced labor camps, summary executions, and widespread surveillance are just a few examples of the brutal tactics employed by the KPA to suppress dissent and maintain the regime's grip on power. North Korea's militarized state has not only isolated its people but also made them victims of one of the most repressive regimes in the world. Reports of citizens being subjected to inhumane treatment in labor camps, public executions, and forced labor are rampant. The KPA is also deeply involved in international criminal activities, including counterfeiting currency and cyber attacks on foreign entities. These activities not only fund the regime but also create global insecurity. 2. Syrian Arab Army. The Syrian Arab Army, SA, loyal to President Bashar al-Assad, has been embroiled in a brutal civil war since 2011. The conflict has seen the SA commit numerous war crimes, including the use of chemical weapons against civilians, indiscriminate bombing of populated areas, and systematic torture of detainees. The Syrian conflict has become a symbol of the international community's failure to protect human rights, with the SAA's actions contributing significantly to the humanitarian crisis in the region. The SAA's brutal tactics have resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths and displaced millions of Syrians. Chemical attacks in Ghouta and Khan Sheikhoun shocked the world, as images of victims suffering from sarin gas circulated globally. The systematic torture of political prisoners in government detention centers has been documented extensively by human rights organizations, highlighting the SAA's role in perpetuating a culture of fear and oppression. Additionally, the SA has been accused of orchestrating mass starvation sieges, a tactic used to break the will of besieged communities by denying them food and medical supplies. 3. Myanmar's Tatmadaw. Myanmar's military, known as the Tatmadaw, has a long history of human rights abuses and criminal activities. The military coup in February 2021, which overthrew the democratically elected government, has only intensified these issues. The Tatmadaw has been accused of committing atrocities against ethnic minorities, including the Rohingya genocide, where thousands were killed and over 1 million were displaced. The military's involvement in drug trafficking and illegal jade mining further tarnishes its reputation, contributing to instability and corruption in the country. The Tatmadaw's actions against the Rohingya have been described as ethnic cleansing by the United Nations. Villages were razed, and survivors recount horrific tales of mass killings, gang rapes, and forced displacements. The coup in 2021 led to nationwide protests that were violently suppressed, with the Tatmadaw killing hundreds of unarmed protesters and detaining thousands. In regions like Kachin and Shan states, the military profits from lucrative illegal jade and drug trades, fueling both local and national conflicts. Before we move on to the next topic, if you're enjoying this content, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you insightful and thought-provoking content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. 4. Nigerian Army. The Nigerian Army has been plagued by accusations of corruption, extrajudicial killings, and human rights violations. In its fight against Boko Haram and other insurgent groups, the military has often resorted to heavy-handed tactics that have resulted in significant civilian casualties. Reports of soldiers engaging in rape, torture, and unlawful detentions are rampant. The Nigerian Army's involvement in illegal oil bunkering and collusion with criminal gangs highlights the pervasive corruption within its ranks. The fight against Boko Haram has seen the Nigerian Army implicated in mass killings and the destruction of entire villages suspected of harboring insurgents. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have documented numerous instances where soldiers detained and tortured civilians on suspicion of being Boko Haram members. Additionally, the military's engagement in illegal oil bunkering has led to environmental degradation and loss of revenue, which could have been used for national development. 5. Venezuelan National Guard. Venezuela's National Guard, under the regime of Nicolas Maduro, has become synonymous with repression and criminality. The National Guard has been instrumental in suppressing political dissent, using excessive force against protesters and committing acts of torture and extrajudicial killings. The military's control over lucrative industries, such as drug trafficking and illegal gold mining, has led to widespread corruption and further entrenched the regime's power. The economic crisis in Venezuela has driven the National Guard to take control of and profit from essential goods and services, leading to widespread shortages and suffering among the populace. Protests against the government are often met with brutal crackdowns, resulting in deaths, injuries, and arbitrary detentions. Moreover, the military's involvement in the narcotics trade has drawn international scrutiny, with high-ranking officials allegedly profiting from the smuggling routes that pass through the country. 6. Russian Armed Forces. The Russian Armed Forces, under President Vladimir Putin, have been involved in various criminal activities and human rights abuses, both domestically and abroad. In conflicts such as the annexation of Crimea and the intervention in Syria, Russian forces have been accused of committing war crimes, including targeting civilians and using banned weapons. Domestically, the military is often used to suppress political opposition, with reports of torture and extrajudicial killings. Additionally, the Russian military's involvement in cyber warfare and disinformation campaigns has destabilized democracies worldwide. In Crimea and eastern Ukraine, Russian forces and their proxies have been implicated in abductions, torture, and extrajudicial killings of perceived opponents. In Syria, the indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, including hospitals and schools, has been documented by numerous human rights organizations. Domestically, the military and security services are tools of political repression, used to silence dissent and maintain the status quo. Cyber attacks originating from Russian military units have targeted elections and critical infrastructure in several countries, undermining global stability. 7. South Sudan People's Defense Forces. The South Sudan People's Defense Forces, SSPDF, have been involved in a brutal civil war since the country's independence in 2011. The conflict has been marked by widespread human rights abuses, including mass killings, sexual violence, and the recruitment of child soldiers. The SSPDF's involvement in cattle raiding, illegal logging, and smuggling further exacerbates the country's instability and suffering. The ongoing violence has resulted in a dire humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced and in need of aid. The civil war in South Sudan has seen atrocities committed by all sides, with the SSPDF frequently implicated in war crimes. Entire villages have been burned, and survivors recount horrific tales of sexual violence and mass executions. The recruitment of child soldiers is rampant, with boys forced to fight and girls subjected to sexual slavery. The military's involvement in illegal logging and cattle raiding not only funds the conflict but also causes significant environmental degradation and food insecurity. 8. Afghan National Army. Despite international efforts to professionalize the Afghan National Army, ANA, it remains riddled with corruption and criminal activities. The ANA has been implicated in drug trafficking, bribery, and human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings and torture. The collapse of the Afghan government in 2021 and the subsequent rise of the Taliban have only highlighted the failures of the ANA, as many soldiers either defected or surrendered without resistance. The ANA's inability to provide security and stability has left Afghanistan in a precarious state. The ANA's involvement in the drug trade has been a significant issue, with soldiers and officers profiting from the opium and heroin markets. Corruption within the ranks has led to ghost soldiers on the payroll and the sale of military equipment to insurgents. Reports of human rights abuses, including the torture of detainees and extrajudicial killings, have further eroded trust in the ANA. The fall of the Afghan government highlighted the deep-rooted problems within the military, with widespread defections and a lack of willingness to fight against the Taliban. 9. Mexican Army. The Mexican Army's involvement in the country's ongoing drug war has led to numerous allegations of corruption, human rights abuses, and criminal activities. Soldiers have been implicated in extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, and torture. The military's collusion with drug cartels and criminal organizations further undermines its credibility and effectiveness in combating crime. Despite efforts to reform the military, the pervasive corruption and violence continue to plague Mexico. The war against drug cartels in Mexico has seen the military frequently accused of human rights violations. Extrajudicial killings of suspected cartel members, forced disappearances, and the torture of detainees are well documented. The military's collusion with drug cartels has also been exposed, with soldiers turning a blind eye to cartel operations or actively participating in them. This corruption undermines public trust and makes it difficult to achieve lasting security and peace. 10. Democratic Republic of the Congo's Armed Forces. The Armed Forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, FARDC, have been embroiled in conflict for decades, with a history of human rights abuses and criminal activities. Soldiers have been accused of mass killings, sexual violence, and the recruitment of child soldiers. The FARDC's involvement in illegal mining and smuggling has fueled the conflict and perpetuated the suffering of the Congolese people. The ongoing violence and instability have created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with millions displaced and in need of assistance. In the DRC, the FARDC is often indistinguishable from the various rebel groups it fights against, with soldiers committing similar atrocities. Mass rapes, the use of child soldiers, and the illegal exploitation of mineral resources are rampant. The illegal mining of minerals such as coltan and gold funds the conflict and enriches military leaders, while the civilian population suffers. The FARDC's actions have contributed to a humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced, facing hunger, and lacking basic services. The impact of criminal armies on global security. The actions of these criminal armies have far-reaching implications for global security and stability. Their involvement in illicit activities, human rights abuses, and corruption not only undermines the rule of law in their respective countries but also contributes to regional and international instability. The international community's response to these issues has often been inadequate, with limited accountability and justice for the victims of these crimes. Criminal armies destabilize regions by perpetuating cycles of violence and undermining legitimate governance. Their actions lead to massive refugee crises, as millions flee the violence and repression. These armies often profit from and sustain illicit economies, such as drug trafficking, illegal mining, and arms smuggling, which further destabilize regions and fund conflicts. The global community's failure to effectively address these issues allows these armies to operate with impunity, perpetuating the cycle of violence and instability. The role of international organizations. International organizations, such as the United Nations and the International Criminal Court, play a crucial role in addressing the actions of criminal armies. These organizations work to document abuses, provide humanitarian aid, and hold perpetrators accountable. However, their efforts are often hampered by political considerations, lack of resources, and the reluctance of powerful states to intervene. Strengthening the capacity and mandate of these organizations is essential for addressing the challenges posed by criminal armies. The UN has established various peacekeeping missions and investigative bodies to monitor and address human rights abuses by criminal armies. The International Criminal Court, ICC, prosecutes individuals responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. However, these efforts often face significant obstacles, including non-cooperation by states, limited funding, and political interference. Enhancing the effectiveness of these organizations requires stronger international support, better resources, and a commitment to upholding international law. Efforts to reform and professionalize militaries. Reforming and professionalizing militaries plagued by corruption and criminal activities is a complex and challenging process. It requires comprehensive efforts to address the root causes of corruption, improve accountability, and ensure respect for human rights. International assistance and cooperation can play a vital role in supporting these reforms, but it must be accompanied by strong political will and commitment from national governments. Efforts to reform criminalized militaries include improving training, establishing robust accountability mechanisms, and promoting transparency. Training programs should emphasize human rights, the rule of law, and ethical conduct. Accountability mechanisms, such as independent oversight bodies and military justice systems, must be empowered to investigate and punish misconduct. Transparency in military operations and finances can reduce opportunities for corruption. International cooperation, including military aid and advisory missions, can support these efforts, but local leadership and commitment are crucial for sustained reform. As we have explored, several militaries around the world in 2024 are more associated with criminal activities and human rights abuses than with their defense capabilities. From North Korea's oppressive regime to the corruption-riddled Mexican army, these forces undermine global security and contribute to regional instability. Addressing these issues requires a comprehensive and sustained effort from the international community, national governments, and civil society organizations. Thank you for watching our video on the most criminal armies in the world in 2024. If you found this information insightful, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update from us. Stay informed and stay safe. See you in the next video.